Okay, so we have two sides, two planes of our three-dimensional form. We need to think about the third plane. Now, if your head, right, is kind of spherical, what we want to do next is we want to look at what is the part where most of the design is. Obviously, if it's a face type of thing, the design is going to be here. If it's a helmet, maybe the design is going to be here or in the back or on the side, right? Maybe there's a headphone element or whatever. So we want to focus on that area that we want to start describing as much as possible. So I'm going to build a couple more slots here because here is the face and I want to articulate where the eyes are and so on and so on. So I just need to put another slot that goes here, okay? But where, on what level? Well, this part of the face looks kind of important because it's kind of like a face mask area. So I'm going to put a plane here, right? And maybe I'm going to also put a plane somewhere over here. Maybe there's a design that goes like this, right? Or maybe there's even like an element that goes this way, okay? So that when you look at it, you know, maybe like there's a visor to my mask or like a face eye protection or something, right? We want to create parts so that we could start to articulate the different surfaces of our design. Now remember, you don't have to do much. You just have to think about how to create three-dimensionality. Right now we have this plane and this plane. We need to add this plane, but we want to use it in a way that is descriptive, okay? So I'm going to insert a plane in this direction. I've shown you how to insert planes at 90 degrees to each other, right? These are 90 degrees to each other. So I'm going to do a plane here where it's a little bit of an angle, right? And that angle is going to give me the shape of the head over here. You could figure out whatever angles you want, but you know, if it's important for you to have a certain type of line somewhere, then you have to think of it from the side drawing, right? And since there's a little point here, this plane is going to be important to my design. So I'm going to use that as a starting point for a slot, okay? So the first thing I want to figure out is what is the design or the angle of this slot. Now we're kind of doing this model on the fly. We're not really drawing it out orthographically at first, right? Which is okay. So I just want you to, you know, think about adapting and adding the drawing to the model as you go along. So I'm going to make a slot, and that's kind of like the visual middle of that slot. So I'm just going to cut this first here, okay? At this point, I would say my blade is dull. I can feel it, so you have to change your blade the moment it's not biting into your material, okay? Because you don't want to use a dull blade. That means that you have to press harder. And if you press harder, that means that you have no control. So I'm just going to take a plier, I'm going to line it up with the line, and I'm going to just break the blade. Put that somewhere safe. You should always put your old blades in some plastic tape or any kind of tape, right? Or put it in an old jar and then just throw it away so that people will not cut themselves as they're throwing out your garbage. So that plane, as you can see, is going to slide in there, okay? And we are going to just cut a rectangle. So I'm just, you know, right now I have guidelines already cut out. I'm just going to use that guideline and I'm just going to slide that in. So what I need to know right now is how far does it have to travel? It has to travel this distance, right? We've already traveled this distance. We have to now add this distance to the next board, right? So I think I'm going to use this side because I can just make my brow over here and just slide that in. So I can now just go over here and just take a ruler, right? You can take a ruler if you want. You can measure. This is about 1.5 inches, You can add 1.5 inches over here, okay? Or you could take your compass, if you have a compass, and you could just line it up like this. The compass is very useful for so many things. And you could now just mark it right here. So let's get this cut going, right? It goes right up to that line. We can always shorten it. And we know that the edge of this plane stops right here. So we can mark that, right? And we can mark it right here. Okay, and then we can cut that off. And then we can design on it. So let me just take my T-square for you so you can see it. You have the front part of the face, right? Over here, this is your front. Obviously, it's the front plane. It's the middle of your face. This is the side view of the face, of the head. And now we are going to put in this top plane like this. Okay, so now we can design what that is. We can say this is the brow of my design. So from the top view, let me just align everything so that it's nice and straight. Okay, so I can just use my pencil and just draw what I think is the appropriate right. We can always change this later, but let me just use the Sharpie so that you can see it. Okay, so that's the top of my head from that plane. Okay, so I'm going to complete that other side. Okay, so now we can put this together. We have now a little more, right? A little more detail. Okay. Right, so I've added the next plane, and it's going to be at the part of the nose. So all of the pointy parts on my design are probably going to be important, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just draw out the profile of what I think the nose or that part of the face will be, right? But remember, you have to go from the edge of one panel to the next. You cannot end here or start there, right? Because at this part of the form, the nose ends there in space. So on this horizontal plane, you have to start your shape there, kind of make your drawing, and then end it also right at this point. All right, so I'm going to just start installing all of my panels. But before I do that, I just want to draw 90 degrees onto the adjacent plane, right? So that I know where it needs to be attached when I'm finally done with the installation, right? And you could continue as much as you like to add. Now you can add a front element over here. You can add a face element over here, but this is a good core to your volume, right? So I've been adding these panels to this head design, and now I'm going to start adding more frontal panels to the face. So once you get the slots in, you can add a little bit of hot glue to secure them. But remember, when you put the hot glue, you can't remove this, right? So if you want to add things to your form without removing the slots, then you will have to make separate pieces and glue them into your design. So I'm going to I've added this cheek over here, this bottom chin part, and I'm going to show you how I did that what you do is you cut a small piece of chipboard, right? You align it to the edges that you want, right? So again, we have to think in terms of another plane being introduced to the design, right? And I'm going to make, so I've marked this point over here and this point over here. Okay, so we now have our cutouts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my hot glue gun and I'm just going to put a very, I'm going to put a very thin bead on the edge of the inside of the rectangle. Okay. And remember, it has to match to the corners, right? So this has to go over here, and we have to just move that up just to here. It's totally okay if it's not 100% because again, this is the inside of the form, right? So once you press that in, you now have another layer to your design. Okay, so I've completed another panel up here, and the head now looks more and more three-dimensional, right? We have not only the X, Y, and Z axis, but we have some subdominant planes that gives us more articulation to the feeling of the form. So I'm going to complete the face of this prototype. I am just adding some rectangles now that are going to complete the eye sockets. Now we have more of a cranium kind of a feel. Just going to bend that so that that plane, even though it's not straight, will flow. So let me do it over here as well before it dries, right? Okay, so there is a little bit of a path. It's not always a straight line, but that's okay because the face is not continuous, right? The plane of the face goes in and out, so we have to try to make our model as close to that as possible. Okay, thank you for watching. Good luck.